Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? So hello, everyone. Welcome to As the Grant Writing Experts. I'm Dr. Meg Bouvier. You know me as the creator of your library of NIH grantsmanship courses. I have over 35 years of experience at NIH as an applicant, an intramural researcher, a staff writer, and now a full-time NIH grant editor and mentor. I've helped clients land over $500 million in federal funding, and I'm here to answer your NIH grant writing questions. So grab a cup of coffee and let's get started. So if you're attending live, just a reminder that you're in listen-only mode. So type your questions into the Q&A box. You can type questions at any time during the live stream. If you have comments that you want to share that are relevant to what's being discussed, feel free to put those in the chat. We'll also be putting material there, some URLs, etc. If you're watching this as a recording, a disclaimer that this is February 21st, 2024, and the things we say today are true to the best of our knowledge today. But things change at NIH very quickly, so always check to see if, check with the NIH website or your program officer to make sure it's still true. So news from my company right now is the live stream boot camp of Master the R series is going to start a week from Friday, which is March 1st. So everybody who is attending this session live has access to courses in the library. All of you can attend the boot camp for no additional charge. So if you would like to do that, it is 4 consecutive Fridays, starting at 2 p.m. Eastern. Each week, I'm going to be presenting live a portion of the course, a chapter of the course. So for example, March 1st, the topic will be preparation for Master the R series, and I'll be talking about vetting your idea in the reporter website and reaching out to the program officer and the types of questions you should ask the program officer and selecting a study section and a NOFO and that kind of thing. Just to note that if you're trying to register, make sure you're using your organizational email address and not like a Gmail address, because you'll get kicked out of the system if you do that. And you also need to register in our library of virtual courses, because that works in conjunction with the live stream boot camp. You'll be able to access, for example, the slides and a recording of the live stream. So be sure to register in that and register for the boot camp. And I believe that Riley has put the URL for boot camp registration for members in the chat. News out of NIH last Friday, probably a lot of you saw that NIH has issued a notice saying that you are not allowed to mark changes on a resubmission application. This is actually not new. So for those who don't know, the history of this is that prior to 2015, you were required to mark changes. Then there was a notice in 2015 that said you are no longer required to mark changes, but you may do so if you want. At some point after that, a couple of years after that, there was actually guidance that was written up on the NIH website, and it's actually in my master resubmissions course, exactly where to find this guidance, that says you're not allowed to mark changes in any way, shape, or form in the research strategy. You can only talk about them in the one-page intro to the revised application. Because so many people missed that guidance and they kept marking the changes in the application, they finally just went ahead and issued a notice. So that notice is also in the chat and was in the table of contents that goes out every Friday to the NIH community. So the take-home message: don't mark anything in your research strategy. The only place to talk about changes to the resubmission is in the intro to the revised application. And my writing tip for that is use an outline in your application. So if, for example, your outline is A, significance, B, innovation, C, approach, and then you can have subheaders under the approach, it's very easy in the intro to refer to a specific section in the outline where you have changed something. So use an outline. That's my writing tip for that. Okay, I'm going to pause there and introduce, well, welcome back. Not really even introduce, because David has been on this this asked the grant writing experts many times now, but I'm delighted to have David Widmer come back to speak with us. He's going to be talking with us about equipment grants, S10 equipment grants. This was actually a request from somebody in our community. So anytime people have questions or suggestions for tutorials, feel free to send them our way. You can email meg@bouviergrant.com. And I'm always looking for things to present on, mini tutorials or guests to have. So I'm delighted that David knows about equipment grants because I don't know a lot about equipment grants. So David, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us something about NIH equipment grants?
I will do so, yes. So I'm David Widmer, and thanks again, Meg, for inviting me. This has got to be, I don't know, my fifth or so time here on AGE. So I'm always happy to nerd out with you, Meg, and chat about all things grants. Just a little bit about me. I started off as an educator, a biologist, historian, but in general, a researcher like Meg. Uh, 30 years ago, left the benchtop to help other scientists in funding acquisition using my own investigator experience as a grant writer writing for myself. So I served as your grant writer, for example, or ran the grants office, and then started a research development team, which was a new field in the early aughts, and ran an RD office for another 14 years. I've started my own consulting company called Vidmar DAJ Consulting, and I'm focused on bringing information about funding development, mentoring and training, research development, grant strategies, and faculty advising, all from the point of view of having used these tools over the last decades to support my faculty. And so that's what I can provide from my company. And today, I do want to talk about the instrumentation grants. I'm going to share my screen and see if I can start this one here. There we go. Okay, so yes, so today we're going to talk a little bit about the NIH equipment grants, and this is set up sort of as a Q&A that with questions that Meg suggested. This is a little bit about me. You can click on that later. So what are equipment grants? In general, they are to help support larger, more expensive, specialized equipment that would be for shared use. That's a key part of this. Um, you can't just want a piece of equipment to keep it in your lab. The entire content and purpose of the grant is to show how this will benefit yourself and your colleagues and your research associated with that instrument. I did detail out the three different types of grants. They're all S10 according to NIH. And this is the 40th year of the program, which is very interesting. The three with links that are there are mainly divided by the award type. So starting from a smaller amount of award to the high-end instrumentation grant program, the HEI, which has several $1 million in awards that can be used.
I want
There
to
is, I
point
did,
out, like, true to NIH, the acronym BIG is actually the smallest one.
there you go. I really, yes, I really like
It's like,
that.
really?
Yes, basic, yes,
Oh, yeah.
yes. So yeah, that's unfortunate. And they also have just released a new S10, a new instrumentation grant, but for those with missions with very low resources. And it definitely has to be supporting education associated with that institution. It's, if you know NSF, that education side of things and their major instrumentation grant program, I think influenced this new S10. Um, and then I always tell my faculty, please pay attention to those NOCs, the notices of special interest, because there can be instrumentation funding opportunities released through the notice, which are very specific, very targeted, but may match your instrumentation need. And then just as a note, I always let everyone know non-NIH places as well. If you are looking for support from CEMRP or the Department of Energy or NSF, as I said, they all have instrumentation programs, and there's no reason not to reformat your, restyle, rewrite your S10 to submit it there if it's appropriate for that funding opportunity. So as I mentioned, the amount of funding increases to $2 million for the HEI program. So that really is the main difference in there. But again, every NOFO has the specifics. Please do note some ICs subscribe or do not subscribe to a particular NOFO. They may limit the types of equipment, instrumentation that you can get. The types that are requested is oft asked question, but because there's just an infinite amount of instrumentation continually being added to in science, it would be prohibitive for NIH to list everything you can purchase. So what you will find in certain NOFOs is prohibitions. You cannot use this money to buy X, and usually it's quite expensive software or things like that. So do pay attention to all of those things. This is the structure of the application. Any changes will be listed in the NOFO, but I just wanted to point out the very many sections here, and just their titles give you an idea of what you are trying to argue to the reviewers. And just like going down this, why do you need this? Why do you need this more than any other cheaper instrument, for example? How are you going to run, manage, track all of those things? You need a technical core or staff or someone. And again, it's shared instrumentation. So what are the multiple research projects within S that are going to use this instrument? And that includes a lot of information about those people. They are called major and minor users. So you have to have some percentage of the major users who have NIH funding. Most of the time it's at least 3 R01 funded major users, but it may be more. And non-NIH funded people who are using these shared instrumentations have to be a smaller percentage. Sometimes it's like only 35% of the user group can be non-NIH funded people. The administration plans for the machine, for servicing, for tracking users, for managing how a crowd of researchers are going to fight over that one chair in front of that one
Right.
instrument. Institutional commitment, which I'll talk about later, the benefit, letters of support, and then almost like a mini grant for each project, these summaries, abstracts, narratives, and references for the main research projects of each of those users. Um,
David, how many
so
pages are these typically? Like how many is the main narrative part? How many pages would that be typically? Just trying to get a
I,
sense of how long it would take to write one.
Yeah, so it really I think the main core is still the 12, but
Okay.
each of the sections is sort of how much you need
Right,
to
right.
respond to this. Major minor users itself is in table format for the most part, and I'll
Yeah,
talk about those as well. But this just gives you an idea going through these names of what you're trying to say. This is very
yeah,
clear. They want to know that it'll be useful, it'll be well cared for, and that there'll be, it won't be the Wild West in how it's being used.
right.
Um, how are they reviewed? That's a good question. So special emphasis panels are convened for S10s. Um, and they're focusing on different review criteria than you've heard, of course, for R1s. Makes sense. It is the need, technical expertise, the projects of the users, administrative plan, and institutional commitment. And I keep on saying I'm going to come back to institutional commitment, and I will, because that is so important. Um, and then the funding lines, it's about 18 to 20 across, 20% across NIH. Again, some ICs don't subscribe to a particular NOFO, or may have a gap of a number of years since they have done so. And I couldn't find like NCI's S10 rates, but NIH wide, it's about that. And I think the last one was fiscal year 2022.
Yeah.
Okay, so preparing to write an application. The reason why I want to speak and I'm like on fire about S10s is because I ran the S10 grant program at my university for a decade. And the main thing I wanted all my faculty to know and told them very early on is you can't just decide to do this and submit it at 5 o'clock the day before, because there's an internal competition or pre-screening. The majority of institutions, research centers, universities have something like this, even if it's not, like a pre-application. The reason is it's a major piece of instrument. Space needs to be allotted, staff need to care for it. A lot has to go around this. Universities sometimes have poor facilities, and that is where shared instruments usually go. Sometimes there's a smaller set of labs that are all focused on the same subject research, and so it would go there. But the point being is, this is not just something you can carry in your backpack. People at the institution have to know this, and the institution needs to be committed to all the work that's going to happen to have such a large and expensive piece of equipment there. So definitely check whose approval you need to get, even if it's not a competition per se. There will be people submitting information about this instrument. Also, because if four different people in your institution are thinking of asking for the same instrument, you want to make sure that it's they're all going to be part of the same grant as opposed to separate ones. Um, and then the other really important part that helps with the competitive nature of your application is choosing the right list of major and minor users. So um, not only whether they've got R01 funding on at a certain percentage as the NOFO requires, but does their research respond to the research and mission interests of that particular IC or of that particular NOFO or NOC, special interest ones. So choosing correctly and choosing the research wisely, you can give the reviewers, the auto checks on their when they're reviewing. Oh yeah, here's missions right
Right.
here. We have the number of R01s and all of those things. So that's all. And this is the last one. A little bit about tips and tricks, some of which I've mentioned. The IC mission match is very important. Choosing the members and the institutional commitment. Um, if it's weak, an institution can write a letter of support, but if it's not really enthusiastically supporting you and telling NIH, we are providing this space, this number of full-time employees, we have this expertise, here's our organizational skill for tracking and all of that stuff, and servicing this very expensive piece of equipment, that could really sink an application. So you want to make sure you've done all of your discussions with your users and with whatever sort of core facility setup there is at your institution. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and check if there's any questions about instrumentation grants.
So we had a question while you were presenting. Somebody asked, where do I find active S10 NOFOs? And I actually dropped the URL in the chat. So it's
Yeah.
the same place you would find any NOFO for NIH. So you'll recognize that NOFO. You've seen it in my writing courses, the virtual courses. You can restrict your search in a whole host of ways, not least of which is by mechanism. So just click the box that says S10 and the active NOFOs and notices pertaining to NOFOs that have to do with S10 will come up. So the other thing is that as I hear you speak about this, and I'm just going to make this comment quickly, and then I think we have time to get to one of the emailed questions that we got. It occurs to me that often when people are preparing to write a multi-project submission, it takes a long runway to write a competitive multi-project submission like a center grant application or a multi-project cooperative agreement like a U54. And a lot of those have a core. And one of the things you can do to prepare your team, in addition to, obtaining smaller amounts of funding so the team is publishing together and has experience and things like that, is to get your cores up and running so that when you go to put in the application for the multi-project submission, your core already exists, or you're talking about building out your core rather than starting it from scratch. And that way reviewers know you're going to hit the ground running with this multi-project grant. This seems to me a great way to do that you could actually put in for an equipment grant to get a core going that you intend to have be part of a future multi-project submission.
Yeah, the
And there's
Spore program project. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Or like if you're doing like a Cobra, where you want to have something that exists and maybe you're building it out and then talking about how you're going to build capacity by increasing a core rather than starting a core from scratch. You could get the equipment, begin the core, and then in the like in a Cobra, talk about how you're going to build it out with that funding. There's another question. Do you assist in both finding and writing submissions for high-end equipment grants? This is a David question, I think.
Well, certainly in helping you with funding development and setting you up with a breakout of how to put together an instrumentation grant. Yes, but I don't do grants writing per se. I'm more in the mentoring and education side of things.
But I would say, you probably could get copies of successful, S10s from your pre-award support office. They could tell you which, researchers have had recent successful S10s, potentially even at the institution you're targeting, and then you could
Yes,
approach that person to say, can I look at your successful recent
yes.
S10?" That's always the thing to do if you don't have access to immediate support. I think most of the people on this call have really large, pre-award support offices, so that's probably, your best bet is to do that.
And you're reminding me that the a list of successful S10s goes in the grant as well. So a
Ah,
track
okay.
record of having S10s managing instruments, you know, that goes into the application as well. So we always had to collect that for an S10.
So David, another question for you. Do you help in finding potential equipment grants? And I assume this person means even beyond NIH since it's a simple search engine at NIH, but for example, looking at NSF, DoD, CDMRP.
Sure, sure. Any sort of, funding development guidance I can certainly help you with. And certainly reach out to me. My email is listed on the slides and in the blog that the link is shared here. Thank you
Yeah,
for
in
asking.
the chat is David's bio and contact information and a link to the blog. So if you want the information that David just presented, that's
Yeah.
all in a Q&A format in the blog post. So with our last couple of minutes, I think we're going to shift gears to another area that David has expertise in and that he and I tend to geek out on a lot, which is the human subjects and clinical trial information form. So we had a question emailed to us, and the person who sent it is actually on this call, and she and I had exchanged some information about this. But basically, I won't read the lengthy question, but in a nutshell, what this person was saying is, as a pre-award support person, I find that my applicants are not devoting enough time or taking seriously enough the need to fill out a really good well thought through human subjects and clinical trial information form. And so her general question was, how do I get them to take this more seriously and not dash it off a week before the deadline, just copy and pasting things out of the research strategy? And can I give them guidance about how many hours they should be devoting to this? And so both David and I feel like the answer to this is how many hours? It depends. And I'll give my thoughts and he'll give his. But for me, of course, the first thing is it a human subject non-clinical trial or clinical trial? Because the trialists have to fill out many more sections of the form. Also, the complexity of the study design is going to dictate how hard it is to write. And the other thing is whether or not they have experience writing anything like this. Like, are they an ESI? They've never laid eyes on a human subjects and clinical trial application before, or is this something they're familiar with? And then, David, do you want to share a few more thoughts?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, again, it's part of like what legwork has the writer done beforehand.
Yeah,
Not only whether you've had experience, let's say you have no experience, but if you take a look at the 5 sections that are in the form, do you know what data points need to happen get in each one? And is there someone in your clinical trials office who is focused on this? Because now that these requirements have changed over the years, some institutions have someone in the CTI or CTO office who can support you in getting, you know, explaining outcome measures or um, making sure you have a biostatistician to do statistical design, which is a huge part
yeah,
of this. But then also, you want to match the trial name and focus between clinicaltrials.gov and the HSCTI form.
yeah.
So it could take quite a while, but if you have everything ahead of time, then your research, your trial. So you're just sort of abstracting that into whatever size you can for the HSCTI form.
Yeah. And technically, you're not allowed to repeat in the human subjects form what is in the research strategy. Having
No,
said
not
that, I think,
research strategy. I
yeah,
was thinking about the
no, I,
protocol itself. Yeah.
right. No, I'm thinking of the original question where she said that people are cutting and pasting from the research
Oh,
strategy
please
into the.
don't.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, I've never seen a reviewer call somebody out on that, but the longer version of the information should appear in the clinical trials form and not in the research strategy. So, typically human subjects or researchers don't have the crushing space limits on the research strategy that non-human subject researchers have, because so much of the detail of the project resides in the human subjects form, and you should be just kind of summarizing it and putting the summary of the human subjects form in the research strategy. One of the suggestions that I made to this person is that, I mean, it requires a culture change, but what you may want to do as the pre-award support office is require that they hand the damn thing in early. So, like, maybe insist that it be in 2 to 4 weeks before the NIH deadline so that you guys have time to review it and make sure that it isn't just kind of a pile of garbage that they just kind of dashed off as an afterthought. Um,
And then if you are in the pre-award office, then you can sort of do an end run to your colleagues in the clinical trials office and say,
right.
this person is submitting, I want to link you two up,
Yeah.
and that can help as well, because otherwise you're going to get an unfinished grant at the
Right.
very end.
Yeah. And there's not much that you can do at that point if it's coming
No.
in at that point. So I thought this question was so interesting, and there were other parts to the question and some specific things about outcome measures and matching to what's in clinicaltrials.gov. And I thought this was an interesting enough question that I was thinking we would schedule a future mini tutorial just on the human subjects form and the types of things that we see reviewers comment on, where people get tripped up on their summary statements with the human subjects form. So if that is something that would be of interest to people, let us know. And we will definitely think about scheduling a mini tutorial. That's another thing that David and I could easily geek out about for hours, is like, which are the things that are really the hot button things for reviewers on a human subjects form, like the ability to successfully recruit and enroll on a clinical trial is probably my number one thing that I see on summary statements, because it's
Yeah.
really expensive to set up a trial that doesn't, where you don't enroll adequately. And here we have somebody saying, please do more on human subjects forms. Thank you. So I know this is, I know this isn't relevant to every single person in on this call, but I do think that it's probably relevant to, I would say, the bulk of the people in on my roster are human subjects researchers. I certainly have lots of trialists and lots of basic science people, but the bulk kind of fall in the middle as the human subjects people. So I think it's David and I will powwow and come up with a date where we could talk about that, and we'll do a little mini tutorial just on like what we see in summary statements and the types of things that we see reviewers really seizing upon. So, but I think that's it. We're out of time. Thank you all so much for attending. And I hope to see many of you at the boot camp a week from Friday. Again, feel free to, you all have access to it at no additional charge. We're going to do it as 4 separate sessions throughout the month of March so that you're kind of writing along with me. There'll be homework at the end of each one, so that we can feel the pain together. Because I know I am starting to wind up, or I just finished cycle 1 and I'm already winding up to start cycle 2. So I'll take a bunch of you with me on my journey. So, and David, it's always a delight to have you.
Same
I'm
here,
looking
same here.
forward to, I know you have several more scheduled, and I'm sure we're going to get more on the calendar, but I always appreciate your expertise and perspective. So thank you so much for sharing that.
My pleasure as always. Good
All
luck,
right,
everybody.
yeah, thank you so much and good luck with your grant writing. And I'll see a lot of you a week from Friday. Take care. Bye bye.